Spirit 92.9 welcomes you to The Lunch Break with your friends Josh, Jess, and Rachel. Join us as we chat about life, food, faith, and everything in between.
Well, when it comes to rest, it can be a challenge. In fact, my 6-year-old calls it boring. So how do you view rest? And is it a struggle for you? And how do you make it a priority? This is what we're talking about today on the Lunch Break podcast. This is episode 5 titled Rest. Woo! We're Josh and Jess and Rachel from here on Spirit 92.9. Hello. And we're going to just have a conversation about this because it's definitely something that can be a challenge for many of us.
For sure. And I actually just got back from vacation, so this is a very relevant topic. But before we get into that, let's talk about what's in our lunchbox.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll start because I didn't bring anything.
It is the Lunch Break podcast, so of course it starts with lunch.
Yeah, so since I just got back from vacation, I did not bring anything. I will be going and getting myself lunch, but Josh and Jess brought some stuff, and they want to share their recipes. So.
Yeah. Well, you know, taking a break from cooking is an important part of rest, too.
Yes,
so.
I'm taking a rest from cooking.
And if I'm totally honest, what I brought for lunch today was yesterday we had a beach day with our family. So I was at the beach most of the day, but I did make my kids tacos before we left. So I'm throwing together a taco salad for lunch. Have you had that one with like the Doritos and then you add some Catalina dressing? So good.
Wait, what's Catalina? What's that?
Oh,
What's Catalina dressing?
It's kind of like a French dressing. I don't know why it's called Catalina. There's probably a story. But anyway, it's
Catalina
kind of like a French
Island,
dressing.
California.
Oh.
I assume that's where it's coming from.
It is Catalina, California dressing. Yeah. So there you go. Okay. So you mix that in there. It's really good. We'll have the recipe for it on our website.
For me, I was also running a little bit short on time. I was at a wedding all day yesterday. And so as I often do for these episodes, I pull out my crock pot, which speaking of rest, a crock pot is just a great way to rest a little bit from cooking because it's just not much work at all.
It does the work for you.
It does the work for me. So I just got some chicken and mixed up a little barbecue sauce and put it in there. So I've got barbecue chicken that smells really good because
it smells good in the office again.
It is in the office, and so I am looking forward to eating that for lunch today.
Josh keeps torturing us
for
with
real
what he's making in his crock pot in the office.
Well,
we all have to smell it.
You're welcome to have some. I'm going to open it up to everybody because I'm not going to eat it all myself.
Well, my lunch is Josh's lunch, so
there you go.
That's perfect. That's great. But recipes will be on our website in the recipe box at spirit929.com. So the whole reason we wanted to talk about rest is there can be a lot of feelings when it comes to rest. And, you know, each one of us represents a different generation and a different perspective on rest. And I know in the last episode that we did, we talked a lot about work-life balance and talked about how that's very important. And a big part of that life part and that balance is rest. So in this current stage of life that we're in, how are we finding rest, Jess?
Why you ask me first? This is such a challenge because, you know, we talked about in the last one too how rest for my generation was almost looked upon as lazy. You know, we had this badge of honor that came with working all the time and working really hard. And so taking a break or resting, well, that was for lazy people. And so that's something that I've really had to learn. And the older I get, I'm learning the more rest I actually need. And also being a working and single mom, which is kind of unique with me, is a bit of a challenge too, because it's hard to plan. It's hard to find time. Rest with a child isn't really rest. It's just parenting somewhere else, you know, if you're on vacation or something like that. So there's that challenge if you have young kids at home. And just finding a way to value it when you're so used to it not being something that's looked upon nicely is hard. And so I think everybody struggles, but it's something that's really important because when I do make the time for it, I do go on vacation or I even just take some time to rest at home. I'm so glad I did it once I do it.
Yeah.
I just got to get there.
Yeah.
How about you, Rachel?
For me, so I don't have children. And I think growing up, I was in an environment and, you know, my parents, they also work in Christian radio. And so we were just always going. We were never stopping. There was another event. There was another thing that we were doing. There was another thing that we were hosting. And plus, I was really involved in a lot of extracurriculars when I was in school. I was in theater. I was in orchestra. I was in choir. So there were just so many different things, and I just kept going and going and going. And then that kind of went into college as well. And I got into adult life, living on my own, and I realized I cannot function like that anymore. And I was functioning off of drinking 4 coffees a day, and I was vibrating. I had so much caffeine in my system, and I was like, I have got to find time for rest. And the thing is, once I started to, I felt guilty. And so once I started to be actually, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just stay at home and chill. I felt guilty because it's this productivity mindset of I'm not being productive, so therefore I am not doing good enough. And so I had to push that thought that is from the devil, I believe. I had to push that away and say, no, this rest is important, because if I don't stop and fill my cup up now, then I can't go into the work week doing what we do here every day and bring encouragement and hope to people that need to hear it. If I don't fill my cup up in that time where I'm resting, I am not at my best, and I'm not using the gifts that God has given to me at their full capacity. So I think for me, a lot of this comes from taking a Sabbath, and that's biblical. Taking a Sabbath on the 7th day, like God did when he created the universe. So I went to this conference, and Jordan Rayner was the guest speaker, and he wrote this book called Redeeming Your Time. And it's all about finding rest in a biblical way. And so he had talked about this story of how he and his family have on their Sundays, he's a pastor, but he, does church services in the morning and does all of that. But then the rest of the day, everyone else in his life knows I am off limits. My wife is off limits. My family is off limits. And they take all of their phones. They leave them in one room.
Oh, no.
Yeah. They lock the door. They don't go in. But then the whole rest of their Sunday, they do whatever fills up their cup as a family.
I love that.
And they don't, this was the thing that changed my perspective. They don't do laundry. They don't do dishes. They don't clean the house. None of that happens on their Sabbath day. And so for me, I always thought, well, if I'm resting and I'm at home, I might as well go ahead and clean the dishes, or I might as well do my laundry, or clean the house, or whatever. But
you feel like you have to do something.
Yes, but that's not resting. Resting is resting, and it's doing those things that fill up your cup. And so when he had talked about that, that completely changed my perspective. And I have kind of got more into this mindset of my weekends have become sacred because, yes, I want to spend time with my friends and my family, and that fills up my cup, but also I need to have that time to just be quiet and sit in silence and sit with the Lord and, obviously go to church on Sunday or some point in the weekend, but also just doing those things that I know are going to fill me up so I can go into the rest of the week full and ready to go.
Yeah.
Josh?
So for me, I can kind of relate to what both of you are saying. I think sometimes there's some guilt associated with rest, or at least some less than. And I know growing up, my parents are very, very hard workers. They just are, and that's who they are. But my dad's a pastor, and I remember he would take Fridays off. Well, he'd be out of the office, but he'd always be doing something at home. He'd be working in the garden. He'd be working on some sort of project, which that's what he did. And he took care of us, and that's amazing. But also, I don't know if that then necessarily modeled rest. I was taught about hard work for sure, but I don't know if I was necessarily always taught about rest in the way that Rachel was just describing with Jordan Rayner. I think now as an adult, I have a pretty good balance between work and resting. There are still times though, I'll talk to one of my good friends and he would talk about all the things he was working on, or he'd talk about another friend of ours who runs his own business and is just always working. And kind of like Jess, you said earlier, it can be a badge of honor when you work yourself into the ground and work your fingers to the bone. And so sometimes I'd maybe feel a little guilty or a little bit less than, like, well, I'm not working that hard, but I have a life outside of work and I enjoy things that I do outside of work, and work is part of my life. It isn't my life. And so even though I do have a good balance, there are times when I can maybe feel a little guilty or less than because of that.
Yeah, I totally. And it's like, even with what I'm trying to do, I still feel guilty a lot of the time, because it's been ingrained in us, I think especially in America, where it's like you work and you work hard, and hard work is great, and that is also biblical. But it's also biblical to be able to take rest. And so I do fight. Like yesterday, I was in the car. I was in an Uber going from the airport to my friend's house after coming back from vacation. I was in the car. I was not on the clock looking through my emails. And I was like, what am I doing? I was like, why am I doing this right now? I am not back, to work yet. I can handle this tomorrow. But it's true. Like, since I think we have our phones and we have access to our emails or, all of the different things that have to do with work, it's easy access to just go right back to it.
What is that? We feel like we have to respond because we're like, well, they know that I can access this. Well, maybe not. Maybe when you rest, you need to turn those email notifications off until you get back to the office.
When I was on vacation for the past week, I did turn my email notifications off.
Good.
Which is smart.
Which I was very proud of myself.
You have a bunch of emails from me to check now that you're back.
But it was really good, because I am one to be like, oh, I haven't checked my email. I should probably go and do that. But it definitely was when I didn't see that little red dot that said how many unread emails I had, I wasn't as apt to go and check it. And it's true, like turning your phone on Do Not Disturb or having like time limits set for stuff. It can be a really, really big help.
It is. And the other thing that I've noticed as a challenge is, like, if we're at home, we've worked all week and now we have the weekend off to rest, quote unquote. But then it's like, well, you were talking about that guy and his family not doing laundry, not doing dishes, all these things. And I'm like, if I don't do those things on the weekend, I don't know when they're going to get done. They're going to pile up even more, and that stresses me out. So for my own mental health, I have to get them done.
Yeah.
But that can be, you can intersperse that with rest too, like those home things. But also, then you got to take some times where you're away from home to rest.
Yeah.
I have learned the value of vacation, and I understand not everybody can go get on an airplane and fly to the beach. I can't do that most of the time, but I'll drive. I'll go. We love going out to the Black Hills in our family. That's a 9-hour drive away, and the cell phones don't really work. You don't get good cell service up there, which is good. And I feel like I'm a world away, and I'm in a beautiful place in nature out in the woods, and I can honestly rest because I can't do anything else at that point. Mom rest, right? Like, you still got to take care of everybody. You still got to make sure everybody's fed and whatever. Yeah. But if I don't leave home, I won't rest. Yeah. Because at home, I'll find things to do,
Yeah.
Well, and here's another thing too. So we seem to be talking about this mostly in the context of work.
Yeah.
But there are other demands outside of work and the chores, household chores, things like that. Other demands that I think of are serving at church, which is a really good thing. But where do you draw the line between serving and resting? Because you need to do both. And I don't know about you two, but I'm a people pleaser.
Yeah.
And so there are times when I say yes, when maybe I should say no. And I've gotten better at saying, you know what, I just don't have the capacity for that right now. But there are times when you can feel a little guilty when you're like, well, I probably could do that. I'm not going to get to stay home and relax at night, but I could do that. And it can be hard to find the balance because I want to serve.
Right.
I think God has called us to serve. I want to do that. But obviously you don't want to be burning the candle on both ends so much that you're just burned out and then you're not serving well. You're not being effective at work. You're not being a good friend, parent, so that's a hard balance to find, and you do need to say no sometimes. And where do you find that balance between saying yes and saying no?
It's true.
And even saying no to your friends, right?
Oh, yes. And there have been some times where, and that's so hard because I am such a people pleaser too, Josh. And I just want to make everyone happy, and I don't want anyone to be mad at me. So I am such a yes person. Like, will you help me do this? Yes. Will you help me do this? Yes. And then I say yes to all those things, and then I look at my calendar and I go, oh, I said yes to way too many things, and I didn't say yes to taking care of myself and giving myself rest. And I'm still kind of in the middle of this right now where I'm figuring out I have to be an advocate for myself and my own mental health and my own relationship with the Lord. Because if I don't get that quiet time with him, I'm not spending time with him. And that's not good. And so I am at this point where I have to say no. And it's hard. And sometimes it can be, I feel so much guilt when I say no, but you have to, so you can have your cup filled.
Yeah, and you can be creative about how you do that. I mean, some friends you can just be honest and say, you know what, I've been running myself ragged and I just need a break. Others you can just say, I'm sorry, I'm not available at that time or that day or whatever, because the truth is you're not if you've carved out and scheduled time for rest. And I think that is another key is you got to be intentional about it and you got to schedule it, you know, so that when somebody does ask you, you can look and say, you know what, I'm not available at that time because you've already scheduled that. One other thing I want to touch on too, you know, is we've been talking a little bit about this, that rest is biblical. I mean, if you think about it, Jesus rested.
Yeah.
He knew it was important, right? I mean, he was about the work of God himself, and he took time to rest. He set down the cross at one point because he needed to rest. And so if he can do it, what makes us think that we have to be going at 100%, 100 miles an hour at all times? And especially when we use him as an excuse for that, like, well, I'm about the Father's business. I'm volunteering at church like Josh was talking about, or, you know, it's work, and our work is ministry here. And so how can we follow his example better when it comes to resting?
Well, you read examples about that in Scripture, and I think it's interesting how Jesus would use that rest time. You'll read about him going somewhere to be alone with his Father. So he would go be alone, but he would be talking to God. So it recharged him spiritually too, and obviously then he was able to go and do the amazing ministry and the miracles and everything that he did, which you see the humanity of Jesus so much, right? You know, you've got his divinity and his humanity. His humanity needed rest. And just like you said, we have a biblical precedent for this in what he did, and even the story of creation, which Rachel, I think you mentioned earlier, God rested on the seventh day. It wasn't because God needed rest, right? Like, God doesn't need sleep, but he modeled that for us. Yeah. And yet sometimes we think, oh, I don't need rest. How do we think that?
Human he made that doesn't need rest.
How do we think that? We need it. That's the example he set for us multiple places in Scripture.
Yeah. Well, are we ready for questions from the lunchbox?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yay!
Josh, you have your tin.
I'm holding
lunchbox,
Josh's
lunchbox.
So yeah, this is Josh's boombox lunchbox, and we're gonna draw some questions from here. Who wants to do my drum roll for me?
Me.
Okay.
Not a drum roll.
I'm pounding on the counter. I don't know if it's coming across in the recording.
Question number 1.
Okay.
What does rest look like for you right now? Who wants to start?
I'll start with that one.
Okay.
It's different things depending on the day and what all I'm doing. It can be very restful for me to be with friends and just refreshing. But there are times too that I kind of just want to be alone and have a movie on or be reading. So there are multiple ways that I rest, and sometimes it's literally sleep. Sometimes I just get home from work and I need a nap. So for me, there are many different things that refresh me and fill me up.
Right. Jess?
Yeah, it's a weird season because, like I said, I have a almost 7-year-old at home right now, and I'm a single mom. So rest is hard to come by. But I can find those pockets in, if she wants to watch one of her kids' shows or something, then I'll watch something I want to watch on my computer, on my laptop, and do that. Or especially in the evening after she goes to bed, I have like an hour and a half there where I can do whatever I want. And sometimes I'll just sit on the couch and stare at the wall and enjoy the silence. Like, I've been waiting all day for silence. Sometimes I'll read, or other things, but you have to find those little pockets of time where you can. Even just going on vacation. I mean, yeah, I'm still doing the mom things, but also I can't do all the work things. So I can sit down around a campfire with my kids and talk. And that's restful to me. Yesterday I said we went to the beach. Is it crazy and chaotic and there's 100 families there? Yeah, but you know what? I got my little sit and float and I went and sat and floated, while Addie was swimming and the family was swimming, and that was restful to me. So you just find those pockets where you can when you're parenting.
Yeah. I'm kind of like Josh in a way, because I definitely need my alone time and I definitely need to just take a step back and be alone. But I also love being with people. I'm definitely an extrovert, introvert, an omnivert. And I have learned when I truly do need time to rest, I need to do things that don't require a lot. Like, I'm really lucky that I have some friends where like we can just read together. And that's our time that we're spending together. Or we go out to coffee and we just talk. Like, just very like low maintenance type of hanging out. But then I love sleep. So I like to take naps and I love to read, and I'm a big binger. So I'll binge a TV show to rest. But I also find rest in just like sitting in silence and just listening to what the Lord wants to tell me. And I also love to listen to worship music. That is a big way that I rest as well, to just kind of recenter myself and hear what God wants to tell me in that silence. So that's how I'm finding rest right now. Next question.
Question number 2. Drum roll.
Okay. How do you find the proper balance between resting and serving?
See, that's the one that I touched on earlier.
Yeah.
And that was my question. And I don't know exactly where that balance is.
We're working on that one.
Right. And I don't know. Do either of you have thoughts on this? Because I haven't figured it out yet.
I think a big part of this is being able to say no. That's a big part, and I'm not an expert at this at all. But there are times where you have to say no, and it's really, really hard when serving is a biblical principle, and you want to be able to help, especially when you're in ministry in some capacity. You want to be able to help. But if you're in a place where you're not going to be able to serve well because you're tired or exhausted, you have to say no. And so I guess finding the proper balance is finding and knowing yourself enough to say, I am not at 100% right now, so I have to say no to this thing. And when you are in a better place, of course, do that thing, serve, be a part of it. And I think also it comes with being honest with people. And sometimes people are going to be like, oh, well, why are they not volunteering or working or whatever? But you have to be your own advocate, and you have to be able to say no.
Yeah. And I would add to that, maybe you figure out what's my capacity right now with everything going on in my life. Maybe it's that I can spend, 2 hours a week serving at church or, in other ministry. And then once that time is full, it's full. You know what I mean? Or it depends what the circumstances are in your life too. At this point in my life, I can't spend a lot of time doing that if it's not something I can't bring a kid with too or whatever. So, you have to know your own capacity, and then you have to put that limit kind of on it, with it also an openness that if something comes up that you just feel like God wants you to do, you can say yes to that.
Right.
But things that are pre-scheduled, you kind of have a limit.
Well, yeah. And for me too, there are times when I've gone into something and not always had the best attitude about serving, but then I do it And afterwards, I'm like, oh, you know what?
Yeah.
I'm glad I did that. And that made me feel good. So there are times, too, when I think we do have to push ourselves a little bit. Because for me, I think I so often default to rest and like, I don't want to do that. I'm just going to stay home. I'm just going to lay on my couch.
I need rest again.
Right. And obviously rest is good to a point. But for me, I sometimes struggle with, because I'm not in a season where I have kids and where I don't necessarily have a lot of responsibilities outside of work, I can rest a lot and sometimes more than I really need to. And so I think it's good sometimes to push myself out of my comfort zone into that serving. And there was a time a couple months ago where I got asked to help somebody move on a Sunday afternoon. That's not normally something I would do on a Sunday afternoon, and it was cold and it was rainy. But I did that and had some good quality time with friends and just felt really good after that. And that was something, again, that I maybe wouldn't have chosen to do, but I said yes, and there was a blessing because of that.
Yeah.
Love that.
Should we do one more?
Yeah, let's do
One more.
Yeah.
Josh, drum roll, please.
Okay, drum roll.
Where did this drum roll come from, and why is it so important?
Because
It's tradition.
It's building anticipation.
Okay.
How are you intentionally making time for rest? Who wants to start?
For me, well, I mean, I planned a vacation.
Good.
I don't want to call that. This one is like there's 11 people coming and I'm the mom, so it's still getting away, right? It's getting away from everyday responsibility and enjoying nature and my family. So I have to put stuff on the calendar. That's what I have to do. I have to have something to look forward to, and then I have to schedule it into my time. And then also just, like I said before, find those pockets of time where I can make it work.
Yeah.
In the everyday.
For me, I was thinking a little bit about this because so often, again, in my stage of life, I'm not always intentional about it because I feel as if it comes sort of naturally. Because I have plenty of blocks of time where I can rest and I'm with friends and something will spontaneously happen that allows me to be filled up and fill my cup. So for me, at this time, I wouldn't say it's as much intentionality, and that might be something that I need to think about a little more going forward because there are likely going to be stages in my life where it's not quite this easy to find rest. So I mean, I do, there's times where I will intentionally take a nap or, just intentionally take some alone time, but I wouldn't say I'm necessarily super intentional about it overall.
Yeah. I'm kind of like a balance between the two of you. So I need to have things scheduled. Like if I'm going to do some sort of, hang out with friends, it's scheduled. Or I have gotten to the point where I have to schedule me time to be like, no, actually, I'm looking at my week and I'm looking at all of the things that I'm doing and I need to take this day or this time to just not do anything. But then also, because I'm also in a season where I don't have kids or any of those responsibilities, I also do have a lot of my own free time. And so there is a lot of rest time that can come from that. But I think the challenge for me is truly taking that time to rest rather than doing the laundry, doing the dishes, cleaning the apartment or whatever. So I think the way I'm being intentional right now is finding the balance between this is the time where I'm going to be with people or I'm going to work on other things. And this is the time where I'm literally going to do nothing. So.
Well, and I feel convicted by what you said earlier, too, about like there's, or Josh, maybe you said it, there's physical rest, but then what about the spiritual rest? Because that's what I feel like I need to be more intentional about scheduling time for and making time for. Because, watching a movie, reading a book, taking a nap is great physical rest, but what about the spiritual rest?
Yeah.
I don't know the last time I got away and did an alone retreat or something like that where I was intentional about just spending time with Jesus. And
Yeah,
so
that's a good point.
that's something I need to work on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was, so on my vacation that I came back from, we were going and we were doing things almost every day. But there was this moment that I was in the car with my friend Shelby and we were in Canada. And it was a gorgeous day. It was beautiful and the clouds were out and everything. And I wasn't like in my Bible. I wasn't listening to worship music, but I was spending time with a dear friend of mine. And I just took that moment and I was like, Lord, thank you. And that was a moment of rest for me, of being like, I am so blessed right now in this current moment. And thank you, Lord, for the beautiful day that we've had. Thank you for this trip. Thank you for my friend. And it was just, I think you can find little pockets of rest throughout your day. And for me, that was one that I'm still thinking about, of like, wow, that tiny little moment that happened of like, thank you, Jesus, for this right now.
It was like heart rest,
yes.
like soul rest,
yes.
right?
Yeah. Exactly. And it's true. Like we do have those, taking a nap or, whatever it is, those physical types of rest. But it is okay, like just taking a pause and thanking the Lord for what you have right now. That is rest, and resting in his goodness and the good things that are going on in your life and around you.
Well, that's all we have time for today. We hope that even this half-hour podcast has been restful for you, or will help you to find some rest. Thanks for listening to the Lunch Break Podcast with Josh, Jess, and Rachel. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music. You can watch this podcast on YouTube as well. The recipes we talked about earlier are all on our website at spirit929.com. Hey, and if you love the podcast, we would appreciate you rating us 5 stars. That helps other people see this podcast and hear this podcast as well. So thank you so much for listening, and we will talk to you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.